Today we're gathering around the campfire with Mina, a QHS member whose life is as exciting and grounding as a hike through the mountains. But what trails did she tread to reach these heights? Let's trek into the wilderness and discover the adventures that led Mina to where she is today.
I'm Mina, and this is my prequel. I was born in North Alabama, November 30th, 1941. So that makes me 83. My life has been two things: a normal life externally, and that spiritual search internally. Externally, I've educated myself, had career, family, done community service. Internally, I was looking for purpose and meaning in life. At age 40, I had a mystical experience, and after that, I think I had purpose in my life. I understood the value of life, the joy of life, the meaning of life. So since age 40, everything has been much better, less anxiety, trying to figure out, why am I here? I've had tragedy, but I've overcome all of it. At birth, I was the last of the cousins born at home. In 1941, in North Alabama, hospitals were an hour away. So on the night my mother had labor pains, my father went to Bowden, Georgia, 15 miles away, and got an attending physician who stayed up all night with my mother. He was a rotund, round man who loved to eat, and all night long he drank coffee and ate 4 dozen tea cakes that my mother had made in that burst of energy an expectant mother gets right before delivering. You could say that we were poor, but we were just like everybody else in the community. We were salt of the earth, self-sufficient, capable, hopeful, debt-free, Christian, and productive. Both parents were creative. My father was an inventor and an entrepreneur. He was also a government worker. My mother was a homemaker, an expert at designing and making clothes. When she made my toddler clothes, I can remember this, she would embroider, there was tatting, smocking, and even as an older child, she would make wool suits with maybe embroidery on it that made me look like a matador, but it was a designer suit. She knew all the domestic arts, and she also knew herbal remedies. My mother and her sister made beautiful quilts. They would come together, and I remember them being at the house when I was 3 years old, 2.5 maybe, and they would also make unique corsages and even wreaths for the church graveyard. My father was not sent to the war because he had a child, and this gave him an exemption, but he was considered essential to the war effort, so they educated him in mechanics, and he was working in Anniston, Alabama, which took us from the farm to Anniston, Alabama, a city, and he was working repairing combat vehicles and testing engines. My brother was born at that time. He was 2 years, 5 months younger than I. I remember when mother was pregnant, and I remember when I was left alone because she went to the hospital, and I remember, of course, when she brought him back home and I wanted to play with him on the bed, but she was careful that I didn't harm him in any way. Each year my mother had a garden. She preserved food, including blackberry jam, and she did something even unique in that time, and that was make a potato hill. And we also had a cow. She nurtured a cow, and the cow was so gentle, my mother allowed me to put my feet in the feeding trough, and I would sit at the head of the cow and pet the cow on the head while she milked the cow. This is going to horrify some of you. My mother's younger brothers were sportsmen. They hunted and fished, so we had all manner of wild critters, and they knew how to. We had turtle soup, and we had squirrel dumplings. Now, I've not had squirrel dumplings since I was 3 years old, but I had them once, and they were delicious, very good. Culturally, the ancestors' names in my father's family were all English. My mother was the granddaughter of German immigrants. Her grandfather, Wilhelm Voss, was employed by the federal government of the U.S. to be a mercenary soldier in the Spanish-American War. My great-grandmother was called a doctor. Now, my mother knew so many herbal remedies. I think she must have learned these herbal remedies from her grandmother. And my ancestors told me that my great-grandmother would go out at night in a horse and buggy, with a horse and buggy, cold, rain, whatever, to birth babies and to treat sick people. So the question is, was she a midwife, an herbalist, or a licensed doctor? I suspect the first two. At age 5, I entered first grade. I was the youngest and the smallest in the class. I think I weighed 38 pounds. There was another girl in the class who weighed 73 pounds. So she was almost twice as big as I was, but school was wonderful. I immediately excelled in art, and the teacher would even ask me to draw things on the board for her. When I began school, I'd never been to kindergarten like the best students in the class had, so the teacher put me in the average group. There were yellowbirds, redbirds, and bluebirds, so I was a redbird. After learning to read, I remember running from the bus, running into the house, shouting, "I can read, I can read." This was the most wonderful thing. And the teacher saw that I wanted to be in the Bluebird book. So she put me teaching the yellowbirds how to read. And my reading skills got strong enough that she promoted me to the Bluebird, the excellent group in the class. And for the next 12 years, I was in the top group in the class. I was also healthy. In school, I missed 3 days during my first 2 years. After that, I never missed another day. For 10 more years, I was healthy every day. Then when I was 15, the doctor discovered that I had scoliosis that was caused by a short left leg. And it's not noticeable. I don't really limp, but the two sides of my body are not the same. and that caused the scoliosis. Now, in assessment of all the issues that I have health-wise, I have glaucoma, and the right eye with correction is 20/70. I have a history of skin cancer, 2 melanomas, 5 carcinomas, those that required surgery, and then I've had uncountable actinic keratosis. My advice is to young women, do not sunbathe. In the 50s, when I was a teenager, it was expected that we have a tan. So I started then and never stopped until I was 40 years old. I went to the dermatologist and he just skinned my face because it was a solid skin cancer and got rid of it. So I go to the dermatologist every 3 months or more. I didn't appreciate the skin God gave me. I had perfect skin and I damaged it terribly. So this is the sunbathing is not advised. In addition to skin cancer, I have a heart murmur. It has never given me any problems. But as I get older, it could. But the reason I'm in the quantum healing system is because of stiffness and pain. When I was age 40, I was exercising, dancing, walking, but if I lay on the floor, that arthritis started to present itself. 40 years later, on a walker, in constant pain, on pain medicine, tired all the time, struggling to power through the pain. So I got the version 6 of the Twine Wave, and within 8 days, I was alternating on the stairs. I was off the walker. I was sleeping better. In a year, I came off the pain meds. The pain meds damage the kidneys. I have reduced kidney function because of the pain meds, but I'm off the pain meds. When I go through the QArc, my kidneys will be restored. Throughout my school years, I excelled academically and in art. I was the go-to person for bulletin boards, decorating for dances, banquets, anything to be painted or decorated or arranged. So I loved art. And when I graduated, my goal was to study art, which I certainly did. But while still in high school, the annual staff asked each senior, "What is your motto?" That was so easy for me. I said, "Life is for those who take advantage of it." And if I look back over my life now, it's the same. It's always been that way. So many opportunities have come to me. I'm grateful that I was able to see the opportunities that were brought to me and take advantage of those opportunities. And this quantum healing system is just one of those opportunities. I wouldn't let it pass for anything in the world. It has changed my life. I used to go to town and do one errand, have to come back and rest. I used to go to yoga class, come home and rest for 2 hours. Now I never stop. I'm stiff, and I need the QArc. I need the V9, but I have my life back. My grandfather taught me to drive when I was 12 years old. The police just looked the other way. When I was 17, I graduated from high school and started to school at West Georgia College and I drove there every day. I lived at home and drove to college, but eventually I took myself to the State Patrol office, filled out the forms. They didn't even ask me to take a driver's test, which was routine, and I got my license. After much study, I racked up a lot of degrees. The first degree was in drawing and painting. After that, I got a master's in art education, and I went to school to get the teaching certificate, which was before the master's. And then when I was 40 years old, I went back to school, got a BA in Spanish language and literature. Then I got an MA in Spanish American and Latin American literatures, and I got 2 more certifications. English is a second language, so I taught that, and another certification in teaching Spanish. But I taught art and Spanish K through university level. I would teach art. I would teach in public school during the day and in college at night. Now, when I first started teaching in Cartersville, because I was living in Atlanta married, teaching art in high school, and then I came to Cartersville, I was art coordinator for the city school system. So I was the director of the art program in Cartersville for quite a while. The question was asked, how was your childhood? It was good and bad, but I overcame all of the bad. It was good in that my father loved me. It was bad in that my mother loved my brother, and she resented me because my father gave me attention and loved me. She wanted all of the attention, and she and I were always in conflict. But I've forgiven her for that. And when I think back now, I know she loved me. And we are told that we choose our parents. So I'm sure there's a karmic reason that I chose the parents I did. And I'm sure I learned what I needed to, and she did. I was very rebellious, so she would beat me. But don't feel sorry for me, because I don't hold it against her in the least. And whatever it taught me, it was just have an unconditional love for everybody. I was married for 30 years to Ron Davis, and we had a son. That son now has a family and triplet children who are my grandchildren. They just turned 16. After 30 years of marriage to this forever husband, he dumped me like a hot potato. And later I met Don Harper, and that was just an ideal marriage. He didn't want me to teach in public school, so I taught only at night on the college level. But there were many times I was not teaching, and he and I spent our time running the rivers on our yacht, and we would stay 2.5 months at a time on board. And we really had a wonderful life. At times, we would go with other couples on their boat. One time, we flew to Rhode Island, got on board with a couple who bought a boat in Rhode Island, and we brought that boat all the way down to as far as Virginia. And after then, another couple took our place. We took their car and brought it back. And so the boat came on in with various couples. But my first husband was an attorney, my second husband a fighter pilot and retired Eastern Airlines pilot. So he was a wonderful navigator on the boat, and he was considered one of the best boat pilots at the Lake Guntersville Yacht Club, where we kept our boat. Aside from marriage, family, and career, I've spent more than 55 years in community service. I was one of the founders of the Etowah Creative Arts Council, and I spent more than 30 years as a volunteer in arts promotion. So I did everything from janitor to president, and we promoted all the arts, visual art, musical, dance, you name it. When I was in the Cartersville Service League, I founded the Cultural Committee. That committee put on a project of presenting an opera. We hired an opera company from Atlanta, and with the proceeds from that operatic concert, we installed the first sculpture in Cartersville, Georgia. So I doubt if many people remember that. That was so many years ago. But they go by the old library, the old civic center, and there's the sculpture. It's still there, installed in the early 1970s. After my second husband died, the Etowah Valley Historical Society asked me to be on the board, and I did many things on the board of the Historical Society for 18 years before retiring. One thing I did was found the African American Quilt Documentation Project. We documented quilts from the Black community that were historic family quilts, and these records are at the Bartow History Museum. This committee also installed Cartersville's second public sculpture. This sculpture is in front of City Hall. It is entitled Pathways to Freedom because it is historical in its subject matter. In the Historical Society, I also did a lot of cooking because I was in charge of receptions. And the cooking was historical according to the program. But I did a couple of Indian menus that accompanied our Indian programs. I also wrote for the newspaper, both for the Historical Society as well as the Creative Arts Council. With the Arts Council, I organized a series of articles on what is art and the value of art for society. I invited 6 professionals from the art world and industry, because some of our industry leaders are great art supporters. One of the people who wrote on the value of what is art and the value of art for society was my Spanish professor, Dr. Montero. And he wrote this beautiful article in Spanish, so I had to translate it. He never would give me a photograph to accompany his article in the newspaper. So I made a sketch, I made a drawing, a portrait of him, and published that in the paper along with the article. And then I framed and gave him the sketch. So he was happy with both of those. I remember I traveled on 6 continents and was active, as I said, in community service. After the death of my second husband, I did that work I described, the Historical Society, for 18 years. So the question is asked, why did I join QHS? I'm only 83 years old. I want to live forever. I think my project that is planned will take 300 years. It's a big project. We'll see how long it takes. But I want to be able-bodied, to be the inspiration and the direction given for this project. My project has 5 different areas. I am in North Georgia at this point. I rent a house in Tattnall County, which is 6 hours south, where my son lives. My humanitarian project will be in Tattnall County. It's a revitalization of the whole county. It's an agricultural section of the state. You could call it the garden of the state. The whole county only has 25,000 people. The little town where I live has less than 3,000 people. And the reason is that the land is covered in farming. It is a farm county. But I want to have a community action center. I want to have a program on Save the Soil with an experiment station and many experiments going on for the best way for the farmers to revitalize the soil. I would like to see all of the towns, the streets, the residences upgraded, revitalized. I have a lot of plans for the city, but of course we will hire professionals to do that. And there will be international commerce. And last but not least, very important, arts promotion. I believe that revitalization comes first so that people have the funds to enjoy art, to go to concerts, to buy art. So we'll get started on the arts early on, but they will grow as the project grows. At age 83, I'm eager to be rejuvenated by the QArc and carry out my humanitarian project. This will be the culmination of a lifetime of humanitarian service, a chance to co-create with God's guidance, heaven on earth. I had a vision, and what I saw was a map of the state of Georgia. The focus was on Tattnall County. People were running in droves from the west, the southwest. There were a few from North Carolina and South Carolina and Tennessee, but the majority were from Alabama and Florida. When they were running across the state, when they got to Tattnall County, they jumped the county line because inside Tattnall County was an oasis. It was prosperous. It offered jobs. And so this was my vision of giving jobs to all these people, good jobs, creative jobs. And all the ideas are not mine. Every person will contribute to this. But this is the idea of creating heaven on earth, so that all willing and able-bodied residents, my inspiration and direction following God's guidance, will create the new world. I look forward to the QArc. It'll make me capable, mind, body, and spirit, to carry out my humanitarian project.
Join us on the Prequel, where every story matters and every voice is heard. Because here at QHS, we're all about healing, learning, and growing together.